Hello, it's Thursday! Can you tell I got a yarn winder? And what a glorious Thursday it'd be. So this week I'm going to be showing you how to make a sugar glider as voted by you guys in the latest Not My Idea poll. So this isn't just any sugar glider, she's actually posable. Now, if your favourite option didn't win in the poll, don't worry about it too much. The second chance draw is already live over on Patreon. Now, last I looked, Wolf was in the lead, but only about half the votes had been cast. So we'll just have to see how it goes. Okay, on to tools and materials. Okay, so for today's project, you're going to need 8 ply 100% acrylic yarn in 4 main colours. You're going to need some pink for your nose and paws, as well as 3 tones of the colour you want to make your sugar glider. So you'll need a mid-tone, a highlight and a shadow tone. As you can see here, we use our lightest tone for the face and belly, your mid-tone for the main body piece, and then your dark colour for his ears and stripes. You'll also need a pair of 20mm safety eyes, your 3.5mm hook, a pair of scissors, pins and needles and some stuffing, as well as your wire brush. So this is a slicker brush that we're going to use to fuzz up her tail. In order to make your sugar glider posable, you're going to need to be using wire. So I'm using florist wire because I'm still making my way through this roll of it, but I have seen in my comments before people suggesting I try pipe cleaners or just regular armature wire, and either would be appropriate for this project. You'll also need a pair of pliers to help you cut your wire. But that's it. I'm just coming to you from the future to make an added note just about yarn choice. So one of the yarns I did choose for this project was a very, very soft, oh, there we go. So one of the yarns I chose was 100% acrylic, but was a soft yarn, and I found when I go to do the tail, you'll see it later, that it wasn't up to the brutal treatment we have to put that yarn through to get the tail nice and fluffy. So I did end up having to swap it out for a sturdier acrylic for at least the tail. So you can see I've still used that dark grey for the face features and for the ears. The tip of the tail I've swapped out for a different colour, so just be aware of that when making your yarn choices. So a written version of this pattern will be sent out to my patrons and will be made available in my Etsy store as well, usually within about a week of the video going live. I will link both in the description down below in case any of you are interested in checking that out. We're going to start by making his eye stripes and the back stripe. We do those pieces first because we want to be able to insert our eye through the eye stripe and into the head. And we're going to make those in your darkest shade. So we start by chaining 2, like so. Then in our second chain from our hook, I'm going to work an increase. I'm then going to chain 1 and turn, and work a single crochet into each of the stitches we did in the previous row. Basically, I'm going to keep working that way back and forth until I've worked up a little stripe. The last row consists of just a decrease 3. Now, what I call a decrease 3 is a decrease worked over 3 stitches. Basically, we insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop in each of the next 3 stitches. When you have a loop from each of those stitches on your hook, yarn over a final time and pull through all 4 loops like so. And there is your decrease 3. So there is our first little eye stripe, and I'm just going to make another one exactly like it. We are then going to use the exact same technique of chaining and turning to work up the back stripe. And finish off. So there is your finished back stripe as well. So you should have 3 finished stripes in front of you, and I want you to pop them all to one side for now. Okay, so next up we're going to be making the head and body piece. We start at the tip of the nose in one colour, then we change to our palest colour and work up a little face mask, before changing to our body colour to work up the rest of the head and body. We're going to focus on the head first. So grab your pink, but have your belly colour and your body colour ready to go. So we are going to start with a magic ring of 6, but for now just work the first 5 stitches. Like so. Now we're going to change to our body colour in the 6th stitch. For this pattern you will always work your colour changes in the stitch before you need the new colour to be active. So to change colours, all you do is insert your hook through the next stitch, in this case into the magic ring, yarn over and pull up a loop. So you should have 2 loops of your old colour on your hook. Then hold your old colour out of the way down your hook and grab a strand of the colour you are changing to. Hold it alongside the strand of your pink and pinch it at the base of the stitch. Yarn over with it and complete the stitch. So if your stitch is a little loose like this one here, gently tug the tail of your old colour to tighten it into place. And because this is a magic ring, I'm just going to tighten that now as well. So you should see here that you've got a finished stitch in your old color, but your new color is on your hook ready to go. Now, how you read this pattern is you'll notice that there are square brackets in most of the rows. You repeat the instructions in the square brackets the number of times shown on the outside of them. So for example, row 2, we have an increase inside the square brackets with a 2 on the outside. So we do 2 increases, then continue on to the next instruction, which is a single crochet. Then 2 increases, and then a single crochet for 10 stitches in total. So there is our finished row 2. So we're now going to work up the next 5 rows in our belly color. Then swapping to our body color in the final stitch of row 7 and continuing on. So when you get to row 9, you are going to encounter another decrease 3. So this stitch is going to help us form a little jawbone type appearance on our head. Now I've already shown you how to do a standard one for the eye stripes, but when working in a spiral, I actually use invisible decrease 3s. You do these by picking up the front loops only of each of the next 3 stitches, yarning over and pulling up 1 loop through all 3 of them. Then yarn over again and complete the stitch as per usual. You don't have to do them this way, I just personally prefer how they look. So I'm going to work 5 more stitches and then we've got another one, and I'll show you again. There we go, time to do the next invisible decrease 3. So I insert my hook through the 3 front loops, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and finish the stitch, like so. I'm then just going to finish off the row. So that is what your head should currently look like. Next up, we're going to work some short rows to curve the back of the neck. So you can see here on Kiwi that it just serves to angle the head before we work up the bulb of the body. If you've never done short rows before, these can feel a little weird. So we start by working 10 single crochet, just as we have been, to move the starting point of our turn. Now this should bring us level with the first decrease 3 we did in row 9. And at this point, rather than continuing to work around, instead I'm going to chain 1 and turn our piece so that I'm working back into the stitches we just did. And I'm going to work 18 single crochet around in that direction, which should bring us around to the stitch before the other decrease 3 from row 9. I'm then going to chain 1 and turn again and do 18 single crochet back across. Like so. So what you can see we are starting to do here is forming this opening at the bottom and the start of this little hood at the top. So from here you'll work a couple more rows that are a mix of decreases and single crochet, closing off the back of that hood. The last row should leave you with just 3 stitches. So there we go, that's what your piece should currently look like. We are now going to start working around that opening to form the body. So if you think of this as a triangle, we're going to work 6 single crochet down the ends of the row on this side to where it joins the underside of the head. So start by working 6 single crochet along the ends of those rows. Then along the underside of the head, we're going to work 6 front post single crochet. Now front post single crochet is when you work around the post of the stitch by inserting your hook from the front of the stitch, then back to the front of the stitch. Now doing those stitches is going to help pull our head up into the correct position. Then to finish off that round, we're going to work 6 single crochet, once again up through the ends of the rows. They should all fit before the 3 stitches from row 16. Finally, work a decrease 3 into the 3 stitches from row 16, and I'm going to work that as an invisible one. And that finishes that round. So there should be 19 stitches in total, and we will be working in a continuous spiral around from here on out. But first, it's time to insert our eyes. So as a side note, if you notice my example has changed slightly between last shot and this shot, I realized I'd somehow completely missed a row of stitches and I frogged the whole thing and went back and fixed it. So we are going to grab our eye stripes. If all your stripes are mixed together, the eye stripes will be the short ones. Now I have stuffed my head, which makes this easier, and your eyes are going to go into row 5. You can see here I work out where I want my eyes to be positioned on just the head, then I remove them and grab my eye stripes. I count 4 openings back from the pointy end of the stripe and insert my eye into one of the gaps. Then we pop it back into the opening I've identified on the head so that the stripe points towards the nose with the long end wrapping around the back of the head. I then repeat this on the other side with the second eye. And with that done, I'm just going to grab my head stripe. Note that the wider end goes at the front, and just plonk it down in the middle of the head to see if I like the positioning. And I'm pretty happy with that at the moment. So when you're happy with your eye positions, remove the stuffing and clip the backs on. Okay, so with those attached, we are now going to continue on and work up the bulb of the body, all in that same body colour. After row 29, I stop and I stuff the whole piece pretty firmly before working the final row and finishing off. I then just pin the stripes in place to make them official, but we will be finessing their location later. So next up, we are going to be making his ears. Now we make these in two pieces. So we've got a smaller inner pink piece and then an outer piece made in your dark colour. Start by grabbing your pink, and we're going to work up a small piece just like we did for the eye stripes, chaining one and turning at the end of each row. It's only 3 rows long, and when you get to the end, finish off. So there, that's what that's supposed to look like, and you're going to need to make 2 of them. So those are the inside of our ears done. You're then going to grab your dark colour, which for me is this dark grey, and it should be the same colour that you've used for your stripes. So we're going to start by making the knot of a magic ring, and working 6 single crochet over the top of it, but then we're not going to pull it tight just yet. So those are my 6 stitches, and you'll note that I'm pulling my magic ring a little bit, but not all the way. That's just because my loop was a little bit big and tricky to work with. And then rather than continue to work in the round, I'm actually going to chain one and turn and work back into those stitches. I'm then going to proceed to work the rest of these rows backwards and forwards up to a little point. So there is our last decrease, and you'll note that I didn't turn at the end of that row. So at this point, there is a difference between your left and right ears. I will be making the left ear on screen. So for the left ear, we're just going to continue working down the side until we've worked 5 single crochet down to the base. We're then going to chain one and turn, and we will be working back up those stitches we just did, but I'm also just going to grab one of my inner ear pieces. We're going to line up that little pink piece so that the long side lines up with our stitches, and the point is at the end away from the magic ring. And we're going to work 4 single crochet by inserting our hooks through both the inner and the outer pieces. Now don't be too precious as to where on that pink piece you insert your hook. If it looks kind of like a stitch can go there, that's probably where the stitch goes. So that's what it looks like after we've done those 4 stitches. We're then going to work a decrease just through our dark outer piece, so working in the next 2 stitches of the grey only, like so. And then we're going to work 4 more single crochet, once again through both the pink and the grey, working down the other side. And then to finish the round, we're just going to work a single crochet through just the grey piece or your outer piece and finish off. So I'm going to pinch around the edge of it to help it curl over the way an ear should, and then I'm going to find the tail of that magic ring and pull that tight as well to help really lock that curled over shape into place. So there is your finished ear, and now you need to make the right one as well, which is basically the same, just with a couple of small differences. And there is your second ear, and we're just going to pin both of those roughly in place. We'll finesse their locations later. Okay, so next up we're going to be making his arms. So we make these arms all in one piece, starting at the hands and working back towards the shoulder. So you're going to need to grab your pink yarn, and then we're going to start by making a magic ring of 6, and then working a row to get us up to 8 stitches around to form the palm of the hand. So there is what it should look like at this point. Now in the next row, we're going to be adding his little fingers and thumb. So there is a difference here between the left hand and the right hand. And once again, I'm going to be making the left hand on screen. So we're going to start by placing the 4 fingers. So we make the finger by working a triple crochet into the front loop only of the next stitch. So a triple crochet is when you yarn over your hook twice, insert it through the front loop of the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. So you should have 4 loops in total on your hook. You're then going to yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through the next 2 loops on your hook, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops on your hook. So there is your triple crochet. Then to complete your little finger or toe, you're going to slip stitch into the back loop of the same stitch. So there is your first little finger, and you're going to do the same thing in the next 3 stitches to form 4 fingers in total. So just like that, so you can see there we've got 4 little fingers. So I'm then going to work a single crochet in the next stitch, and then we'll be placing our thumb just by working another one of those little triple crochet slip stitch combos in the stitch after that. And then 2 single crochet to finish the round. So there is his little left hand. Now you can see that the forefinger and the thumb will form an L just like yours does, so that you can tell the difference between the left hand and the right hand once you've made it. So then we're going to work row 4. Now in row 4 you need to be careful to only work in the triple crochets from row 3 and not the slip stitches. So we're going to start by working 2 decreases and then 4 single crochet, which should leave you with 6 stitches in your round only. If you have more than that, you should go back and double check you haven't stitched into any of your slip stitches. Now in the last stitch of row 4, we are going to change back to our body color. And then we're going to work just the next 6 rows to build up the arm and then finish off. Now we're not going to stuff this piece at all because we need it to have a lot of flexibility. You are then going to create your right arm. Now you'll note that it's basically the same, but with the thumb in a slightly different position, and the increases on your arm are also in a slightly different position. And we're just going to pin those roughly in place as well, just to help us keep track of where everything is. So next up we're going to make his little legs. Now we use the exact same techniques we used for the arms to make the legs, even including the toe stitches. So there's no difference between your left leg and your right leg, so you're just going to make 2 exactly the same. And once again, we will not be stuffing these pieces. So there's your first one done, and you just need to whip up another one exactly the same. And I'm once again just going to pin them roughly in place below the arms. Okay, so next up we're going to be working up the tail. So you can see how bendy mine is, that I've clearly used wire in it, and I'm just going to show you how we prep that now. So to prep my wire, I'm going to be cutting a piece that's about 25 to 30 centimeters long. Now that's because I'm using very thin flexible wire, and I want to double it over to make sure that my tail has some strength to it. If you're using thicker wire or a pipe cleaner, you probably won't need to double yours over, but make sure that you leave room for it to be inserted into the body to give it some stability, and so that it can be curled over at the end so it doesn't have a sharp point to it. So I'm just going to pop that to one side for now because we're going to start by stitching up a little bit of the tail before we insert our wire. So we form this tail by starting at the end of it and then working our way back towards the body. We're going to start in our darker color and change after a couple of rows to our regular body color. And you'll note that it's very fluffy. Right, I learned a new stitch for you all this week. It was suggested to me in my comments a while back, but this is my first time using it today. It's called the loop stitch, and I believe the abbreviation is LP, so that's what I've used today. So this is a stitch I had to learn specifically for this pattern, but honestly, I'm never going back to lark head knots. Never. So we're going to grab our darkest color and we're going to work up a magic ring of 6 just to get us started. Now this yarn is a little bit softer, so I'm a little bit worried about how this is going to go, but we'll see. And that, children, is what we call foreshadowing. So there is our magic ring, and we're now going to work our first row of loop stitches. So this is how I do loop stitches. So we start by inserting our hook through the stitch we want to stitch into, just as though I was going to do a single crochet. Like that. So normally I would just yarn over and pull up a loop like that. But because it's a loop stitch, I'm going to slide my finger down to the end of the hook and yarn over both my finger and the hook. I'm then going to grab it with my hook and pull up the loop with my finger still inside it. I'm then going to slide that loop off my finger with my left hand, yarn over again and pull through both loops to complete the stitch. So that should leave me with a single crochet with a wider loop sort of dangling off the piece. Now I do just need to mention that for this tail piece, I do normally work with the right side facing me. So just because we're doing loop stitches, I'm actually having to work with the right side facing away from me. So that's inside out based on how I would normally define it. So I am just going to do a couple more of those in slow motion for you. So I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over my finger, slide the loop off my finger, and away we go. You do want your loops all to be roughly the same size, and we're just going to continue on and finish that round of 6 loop stitches. So there is our first row of loop stitches. So now we're just going to continue on using a combination of loop stitches and single crochet until we reach the end of row 10. Now at the end of row 10, we're going to change to our body color and insert our wire. So that's what it should look like at the end of row 10, and we're going to stop and insert our wire. Now, as you can see here, I've doubled mine over, and I'm just going to insert one end of that wire straight down through the middle of the magic ring and out our open end, and the other end of it one stitch over. Now, what that's going to do is help keep my piece of wire in place, and because it's got a doubled over end, it won't be poking anybody or stabbing anyone as well. So I'm then just going to change to my body color, and we're going to work up the rest of our tail once again with a combination of loop stitches and single crochet. Okay, so not gonna lie, I did lose count a couple of times in there, but we're basically just making a long loopy tube, so it doesn't really matter. But this is approximately what your tail should look like. You can honestly stop at this point if you like that appearance. But, all right, so this next bit's gonna feel really, really wrong, but I'm gonna need you to grab your scissors. So you're going to take those scissors and you're just going to snip down the middle of every single loop in the tail. So once again, you can choose to stop at this point if you like the look of the sort of little bottle brush tail that we've got going here. But I'm going to be grabbing my wire brush and I'm just going to brush out all of those little ends until they're nice and fluffy. It was right about here that things started going wrong. So I'm just going to take a second. I'm going to remake this piece. I got all of the loops there. So we are back at this point. And again, you can stop at this point if you like. But I am going to grab my brush and moment of truth, just brush this out. And you see how it goes all nice and fluffy. Oh my God, it just pulled straight off again. All right, so I decided to sort of jump in here from the future to discuss this a little bit. I ended up making 3 separate tails for this little guy. And I've officially learned my lesson about yarn choices. So you already heard me call this out a little bit during Tools and Materials, but basically I started using a very soft acrylic that had been treated with something, and every time I tried to do this loop technique on it, it fell apart. So I was horrified because I hadn't had the same issue with Kiwi. And in the end, for the third one, I swapped it out for just a sturdier basic acrylic and no issues whatsoever. It just worked first time. So I did just want to say, if you do encounter this same issue, but you don't have the option of swapping your yarn out, I would suggest leaving your tail at the loop stage and not cutting them, or use the lark head knot technique that I used in the fluffy kitten video. It should stand up better to this kind of abuse. Okay, so third time's the charm, and you'll note that I've swapped to a different color. But that is what your finished tail should look like. It's all nice and fluffy. You can see the ends of the wire sticking out the bottom, and I'm just going to loosely pin that to the butt where I want the tail to be attached later. And at this point, he's looking really cute, but we are still missing one major piece. Now you can realistically stop at this point, particularly if you don't want yours to be posable. But if you want yours to be a flying sugar glider, you are going to need to keep going and make this belly piece. So that tummy patch is actually just a basic rectangle that we stitch up in our palest color. And we then crochet a piece of wire around the entire edge of it, and that is what allows his limbs to hold their shape when you're posing him later. So grab your lightest color, and we're going to start by chaining 19 and then working up the rest of those rows. And finish off, just like that. So that's what your piece should look like. We're then going to cut a piece of wire so that it is long enough to wrap around the entire edge of that rectangle so that it has about 2 extra inches or about 5 extra centimeters overlap. So I'm then going to start in the middle of our top starting base chain and single crochet around the whole edge so that I'm working over the top of the wire. And you do that by just inserting your hook under the strand of wire as you insert it through your stitch and then working the stitch over the top of it. So that should be 9 single crochet along the top, then 16 single crochet down the side, (20 single crochet along the bottom, (16 single crochet up the other side), and then 9 single crochet along the top again until we're back at the start. Now those stitch counts don't have to be exact, just make sure you go around the whole edge and try to keep it even on both sides. And one end of your wire should stick out of both your start and your finishing point, and you can twist those two pieces together when you're done. So there is your little belly piece. Okay, so as you can see here, there are a lot of pieces to assemble. So first things first, check that you have all of your pieces. So you should have your head and body with your eye stripes already attached through the eye pieces. You should have a head and body stripe, a left and a right ear, a left and a right set of arms, 2 back legs, that should be exactly the same, a nice fluffy tail, and your little belly blanket. So with all of those pieces in mind, I'm going to move my arms, legs, tail, and belly out of the way, and the ears, and I'm just going to start with the head and body piece and the stripes. We have already kind of roughly pinned these eye stripes where we want them to go, but now's the time to come to kind of really finesse that positioning. So with the pointy end of these stripes, you do want 1 stitch of your palest color visible between the pink of the nose and the point of the stripe. So you can pin yours in place on both sides there. So you can see we've got 1 full ring of stitches in our paler color between our nose and the points of those stripes. And then on the back end of them, you do want them to take sort of a very low angle. Just basically pin them where they fall at the back of the head there. So you can see that they're kind of along the side, not along the top. And personally, before sewing those on, I like to pin my head and back stripe on at the same time and stitch them all on together, because then you get a better feel for where these should actually be falling. So for this stripe here, you'll note that it has a wider end and a narrower end. So the wider end goes on top of the head and the narrower end goes down the back. Counting 2 rows back from the pink of the nose, that's where you line this point up, just in the middle between those eyes. Chuck a pin in there, and then just curl it around the back, trying to keep it as centered as possible. And I chuck 1 pin in sort of at the base down there, and a couple of pins in up the sides, just to try and really hold that in place. So I can see that there's very even spacing between my stripes, including where they fall at the back, and so I know that I've got them roughly in the right position. Now don't be too alarmed if your eyes look a little bit funny at this point, because we will be adding some stitching to them to help incorporate them better into the head. So at this point I'm going to take some of my dark grey and stitch on these stripes. So first up, weapon of choice, I suggest choosing a curved needle if you have one available to you. Otherwise, I suggest a sharp needle, not a darning needle for this particular one. A lot of the time you can get away with using something along the lines of this. That's not the weapon you want today. Okay, so you'll note that the stripes are kind of standing off the head just because they are a whole other layer. We want to stitch them down as flat as possible. So what I'm going to do in order to ensure that, anywhere there's an option to pick up what's essentially a top loop instead of the bottom loop, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to thread my yarn up under the top loop and then back down and into the body. And what that's going to do is pull that edge down and incorporate it better into the body. And it's a bit easier to see once you've done a few more of them. Now note how I'm poking my needle through the body as well. So while I'm trying to pick up, I get that these pieces have rough edges to them, but I'm picking up sort of the top-ish portion of it with my needle. But then when I'm working into the body, I'm going into the gaps between the stitches. I'm not poking through the stitches themselves. It's going to help your sewing blend more into the creature. So you can see there, hopefully a little bit. That's the edge we're getting. So there we go. So on the top, you can see that we've got kind of a hard ridge where we haven't sewn it down yet, but on the bottom, it's blending nicely into the body, as much as these 2 colors can. So this whole section under the eye, you don't need to worry about sewing that down, it's already held. So I'm just going to skip it by inserting my needle through the body and out. Again, working in the gaps between the stitches so that it's not visible. And then I'm going to repeat the same thing to the tip of the nose. When you get to this point, sorry, I'll do 1 more stitch and then I'll do the point. When you get to the point of the nose, insert your needle literally through that starting knot, being careful not to unravel it, but we want to make sure that that very tip of the work is fastened down exactly where we want it to fall, because it will affect the face. So there we go, so I'm out through the tip of the nose there, and then I want it to fall exactly there. Watch out for all these little ends flying around trying to tangle you up. Now I can safely remove that pin, and that tip will stay there. Now when I go to weave this end in later. I'm going to weave it in the very closest gap so it doesn't leave any kind of little lines on the work. So that's exactly what I'm going to continue doing to sew on each of these eye stripes, as well as this stripe down the center of the head and down the back. Just like that. So I have sewn on all 3 stripes, and I've added a little bit of an eyelid to one of his eyes, and I'm going to show you how I did that on the other eye now. So you'll note that I have threaded my needle through part of the grey stripe just in the top corner of the eye here, right there. And then what I'm going to do is insert my needle again on the underside of the eye. Now it's kind of a judgment call as to how big you want these eyelids to be, but I'm literally just going to thread it in and then thread it back out again really close to each other. Now, as I pull this tight, I want this loop of yarn to fall along the back edge of that eye. So I'm just going to make sure that it falls there. And part of it might get tucked under the eye like there, and that's fine as well. So I'm now going to work backwards and forwards until I'm happy with the size eyelid I have. So that's 2 strands. And I'm just going to do a third one just to finish it off. And I'm going to insert my needle and thread it out somewhere else in the body just to secure it in place. So just like that, pulled nice and tight. So there is his second eyelid. So now he has an eyelid on both eyes. If you haven't yet, tuck all of your ends in. You'll thank yourself later if you just try and work really, really cleanly. Okay, so next up we're going to do his ears. So there they are. They should still have this nice little C curve to them on the bottom. And you're just going to grab your left ear and see how there's like this gap between the 2 stripes at the back of his head. You're just going to use your ear to fill that gap. So there's the first one pinned in place. So that's it from the back, from the side. You can do more sort of horizontal ears if that's what you like. Mine are nice and perky. He's up and he's listening to us. Then I'm just going to do the same thing with the other ear so that it matches the location of the first one. I think I put that one slightly too far back. We'll sneak it forward a little bit. Right, so once again in your dark color, we're going to sew around the edge of those ears. So there's no real tips or tricks to this particular part of it. I am still working my needle in and out through the gaps between the stitches and not into the stitches themselves. But other than that, it's just a matter of sewing around the entire edge. Once again, tuck in all of your ends and give your ears the tug test, just to make sure that they are firmly attached. So his ears are attached. So next up what we have is we need to position his arms and legs, but his arms and legs are dictated greatly by his belly position as well. So this bit gets a little bit fiddly. Just lay him out like a little piece of roadkill. So that's him from underneath. If I flip him over, you get a better feel for sort of where the arms and legs get positioned. Have you guys seen the picture of the hedgehog getting x-rayed? I'll put it up on screen now. It's giving me that kind of idea here. So there we go. So that's what we're aiming for. So we're going to start by grabbing our arms. Now note that there is a difference between the right and the left. Pay attention to where the thumbs are. When facing away from you, the thumb and first finger should form an L on your left hand. And you want to basically just line it up with the edge of the ear, so it should be just like halfway across the body, directly under where the head is. And you're just going to very quickly pin that in place. Try not to overthink it. So remember, we didn't stuff this piece at all, and you want your little hand facing forward, like saying stop. And I'm going to pop the other one on the other side. Now there is a trick to sewing those on, so don't do anything with them yet. So basically, in order to position the legs and to make sure our arms are positioned correctly, what we're going to actually do is start pinning on the belly piece. We use that to pin our legs in place and adjust our arms. Then we take the belly piece off and sew on the arms and legs. So with those roughly in place, I'm going to grab my legs and put them in standby. And I'm going to grab our cute little belly blanket. It's just like tucking him in for bed at night. All right, so we know that our wire is poking out at the top of it. And I'm just going to line that, we're going to line that center up under his chin. Don't worry about poking the wire in just yet. So center it under his chin. Quick little pin in there. So I'm then going to fold it around the edge of his neck, pin one on either side, like that, and then grab the corner and we're going to line it up with the top of the arm. So that corner should reach where the hand joins where the arm is. I'm going to pin it there. Careful not to stab yourself. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. So now he's very well tucked into bed, too well tucked into bed. If you're tucking people into bed this way, you're doing it wrong. So it curves around. That's it from the back. You can see that I've secured it along the tops of the arms. And that's where it's meeting there as well. So next up, we are going to push it in towards the body and line it up with the underside of the arm as well. Pin it to the underside of the arm and pin it to at the base of the arm where it meets the body again as well. What I mean about it being just a little bit complicated, because we need to secure this, the whole little possum starfish just gets a little bit complex and fiddly. So once again, just securing it down the edge of the arm and then to the body as well. And now we are ready for our legs. And that wire is helping hold this rigid, which I actually think is making assembly a lot easier. Okay, so the little legs or the little feet. The sole of the foot, if your possum is lying down and the leg is attached there, the foot should be facing outwards. So I'm going to line that up. It should just touch that bottom corner of the arm there as well. It should stick out at a bit of an angle. Pin that down along the body there like so, and then just really secure it in. Do the same thing on the other side. Then we are going to tilt that leg down until it meets the bottom corner of our little belly here. Pin that in place. Tilt that leg down. Even if it pulls slightly free of where you've pinned it, that's okay. Once it's sewn, it'll be a little bit more secure. Pull the corner of the blanket up to where it meets the foot. There we go. Sorry, I just hadn't pinned that piece properly. Then we're just going to fold up the bottom of that so it curves underneath. So that is roughly where that blanket is going to go. The tail will, of course, go here when we're done, just to get you a better idea of the finished piece. Side, it's the belly. So being careful not to unpin where our legs are currently positioned. I'm going to unpin that belly piece now, the whole way around. But I'm going to leave it bent up in its little wireframe position as well, just because it makes it so much easier to just slip back on when this bit's done. Oh, so many pins. There we go, so you see it holds its little shape. Okay, and there is our rough positioning for our, well, there is our positioning for our legs. And you should make sure that when he's in this little starfish mode, the palms of his hands and the soles of his feet are all pointing outwards. Okay, so we are going to sew these 4 limbs on using our matching body color, so that's your mid-tone. And there is a special way I'm going to sew these on so that I can pose him in the 2 different poses. So obviously we have our little outstretched flying position, but then we also have this like neutral sitting kind of position as well, and you want your arms to be able to do both, and so there is a way that I sew them on to allow it to do that. So starting with the back facing me, I'm just going to thread my needle in through any random stitch and come out in the corner of the arm. For some reason I always do the arms first. I do the legs first if that makes more sense for you. And I've just picked up the outer loop of the top layer of that arm. So there are 2 layers to this arm because we never sealed the back of it. I'm just picking up the outer loop of the top layer, picking it up from underneath just like we did with our stripes, and then working my needle back between the gaps of the stitches on the body. And I'm just going to work that along the entire top of the arm, or I suppose it's technically the back of the arm, but I think you know what I mean just from visuals. Fasten that top corner down as well. Okay, so if I remove all of the pins from this arm now, we're not done sewing this one on, but if I remove all the pins from it, I can see it's attached along the top, but it's not attached at all on the bottom. In fact, I could get my finger or some wire in there if I wanted to, which I don't, but I could. That is going to form the basis of the little hinge that we want to do, because we want it to be able to sit in this position, but we also want it to be able to sit in this position. So if we hinge it, it can. So now what I'm going to do, fold this arm out if it makes it easier, is I'm just going to work my way back along the inside now, but I'm going to be sewing this edge here basically to the other side of the arm only, so not to the body at all. Now, you probably could do this step before attaching it to the body, but for some reason I find it way easier to identify what loops I'm working in and get that little hinge right if I'm doing it this way. So it also allows you to have a little bit more rotation when pinning the pieces on initially if you haven't already locked in which side is the hinge. I'm just working my way down that whole arm. Once again, I'm working my needle just through the gaps in the stitches. That's going to be a recurring theme here. That is how you should be sewing all of your pieces on every single time to everything, with very few exceptions. I've gotten back to that bottom corner and I can see that that corner hasn't been attached properly, so I will sew that down as well. And there, so that is that arm completely attached. But you'll note that it has a free range of movement. It's not stuck in any one position. And now we're basically just going to do the same thing for the other 4 legs. I should also say that if you don't want to use wire, totally understandable. Just stitch your legs down in the pose that you want your sugar glider to be holding. So you'll note that I'm pinning down each leg as I sew them on, and I'm tucking my ends in as I go as well. The reason for pinning them down in the inner pose instead of the outstretched pose is because it stops my yarn as I'm stitching it getting caught around it in loops, and just made the whole thing just a little bit less painful for me. Oh my God, my little mister. And then to finish off, I'm just going to insert my needle through the piece somewhere far, far away. All right, so there he is. He's giving me a little bit of opossum vibe. Or possum? The rat-like things that stalk American cities in television shows, right? A little bit? Why you had to go and give those things a silent O at the start, I don't know what. I don't know why we just call them possums over here, but they live in trees and they're actually kind of cute. All right, there we go. So now we can go, wah! Full flasher on the little guy. And we're going to grab our little blanket, just nestle it back on top. I'm going to take my wire and turn it at a right angle to the blanket. So like, there we go. So it's facing inwards. There's the tip of it there. And I promise he's fine, even if this bit looks a little violent, but I promise it's fine. I'm just going to stab the end of that into his throat. You can trim it off a little bit if yours is a bit long as well, but there we go. Pin it down on either side. And then basically reattach it to all of the key points we talked about before. So I've done the base of the head, and now I'm just doing the bit that curls up over the butt. And then you want each of the corners to line up with each of the limbs. So there we go, so I've pinned each of the corners to one of the hands. Then I've pinned down the top of the arm as well, just by pinching it in around the neck. I'm going to give him a little rotate, like potate, and stretch the bottom corners out to the feet. Stretch the feet out to the bottom corners, I should say. That's one, that's the other. We're going to fasten the edge of that to the bottom edge of the leg, then up around the butt. And whatever you do on one side, try to make it even on the other side as much as possible. And then we just have these two sort of pockets on either side, so one there and one there. And what you want to do is push the middle of it up to sculpt around his belly. It's up to you which side you want to pin this from. There we go. And there we go. Then, sorry, I know there's a lot of pinning here. And then we're going to pin it down around the other side of each of the limbs, so the inside of each of the limb. I should also mention that it's really important you get all these pins out again when we're done. So make sure you keep an eye on how many you've put in, or use really brightly coloured ones. I'm a little nervous about this white guy. Okay, then it's just a matter of like checking to see if you're happy with it. Like for mine, I actually think that I've put him off center. So I'm about to take this whole blanket off and reapply it using those exact same techniques, but like one stitch over. There we go. So I'm really glad that I did that. I literally just shifted it over a little bit because I basically forgot that I started my wire slightly off center. And now it is all centered nicely. So matching up with our previous little dude. I always think it's really interesting to see how different types of yarn turn out differently. Like this pink has worked up really chubby, whereas this gray worked up a little bit thinner, like still pudgy, but he's definitely smaller. Anywho, okay, so now you are just going to take the skills that we learned through sewing on the arms and sewing on the stripes to sew around the entire edge. So we're going to start by working along from one hand, along the top of the arm, under the neck, along to the top of the other arm. You are then going to sew along the back of the arm down to the webbing of the wing, and then up the side of the leg. You're then going to sew from one foot all the way along the back to the other foot, and then repeat the process so along this inner curve and up to the hand where we started from. Where possible, only insert your needle through the front loop, so that's the outer loop in this case, and you will get a smoother finish. And you will of course be doing this using a colour that matches your belly colour. So for me that is white, and we are just going to do that now. And don't forget that there is wire worked around the edge of this piece as well. So your needle might collide with that every now and then. It's not the end of the world, it just can be a bit jarring if you're not expecting it. And I'm making sure that I'm getting through every single loop the whole way around. All right, so once I think I'm done, I'm going to just check around the whole edge to make sure that there's no little openings somewhere that I've missed. And this is looking pretty good. Then I'm going to thread my needle back through to somewhere else on the body to finish off. And just tuck all of my ends in. There we go. And so now we should be able to fold his legs in and have him hold that pose. Now, if you note that the first time you do it, your wires will stick out at a bit of a funny angle, just a double pinch will give it a little softer look. Mess around with the edge there to get it to sit the way you want it. All right, so we are clearly nearly done. The last thing we have to do is attach his fuzzy little tail. So I've just straightened mine back out there for the moment. I've got my wire end there, which is also just still a little bit long. I'm going to trim that off just a little bit, just so that I don't have to stab him quite as much. It's always upsetting. There we go. And then it's just a matter of centering it in the middle of the butt. That's where I want mine. If you're struggling to poke yours through like I am there, use your hook to clear the way first. I'm sorry, it's just occurring to me how horrible this has to look on camera. Poke that in and then pin around the base. The fuzz can make it a little tricky to do. And then you're just going to take a little bit more of your grey yarn and sew around the base of your tail and then weave in all of your ends. Alright, so there is your little sugar glider. I hope you had a fun time making her with me. So you may have noticed that the channel is on a countdown to 10k subs at the moment, which is exciting and a lot bigger than I ever really thought we would get. And if you haven't already, think about hitting that subscribe button and seeing if we can't maybe hit that goal by the end of March. That feels crazy to say. Anyway, I hope you all have a terrific week and I will see you here again next Thursday. Okay, bye!
Anyway, I hope you all have a terrific week and I'll see you again next Thursday. Bye!
Yeah, thank you.